So really glad that everybody is here. I'm so happy to see you all today. The Jamboard is just a place where you can go to introduce yourself. And I'm also asking everyone to share one word about if I, tell you, okay, let's have an interview. We have a reporter calling. Oops, sorry. We have a reporter calling. How does that make you feel? And I am looking at some of the responses, but waiting for some more to come in. So please head over to that Jamboard to put your name, your organization, and how you feel about being interviewed by the media. I am looking at the Jamboard right now, and I see several of your names, and I see some folks are excited. Some people are excited about being interviewed. Some people are feeling a little anxious about it. Greg's feeling curious. That's awesome. Some people are feeling nervous. I think feeling nervous and anxious is probably a common feeling when it comes to interviews. And I'm just going to go back to my presentation and share my screen here again. One of the reasons that we are doing this training is because the big way to fight those negative feelings is to prepare, prepare, prepare. And you see my picture of Simone Biles here. You know, she had to be terrified the first time she did this backflip thingy that she's doing on the balance beam right now. I know I would be, but she practices and practices and practices, even as an Olympian, every day to get better and better at it, right? So we know that, you know, doing that practice all the time is really the way to feel better about it and be prepared. So one thing I want you to think about is why we want to talk to the media. So I want you to stop for a second and think about your organization. Think about your organization's mission. And what are some of the, and you don't have to write any of this down, right? This is just something to think about. What are some of the biggest things that you personally and your organization are trying to achieve for kids and families right now? So I want you to just reflect on that for a second. And then we're going to go back to the Jamboard, to page 2 of the Jamboard, because it has a second page. And I would love for you to share why you want to work with the media. You know, why do you want to get that story out there about what you're trying to do for kids and for families? So I'm going to drop the Jamboard link again, just in case you need it, but go ahead and go to page 2 of that Jamboard and just grab a Post-it there and just share why you want to get this story out into the media. What is motivating you? And I'm seeing some stuff coming up. Is anybody having trouble getting over to the Jamboard at all? Okay. So I'm seeing bring awareness to the issue, inspire more people to advocate, inform people so they will help the cause. No more fake news. Absolutely. All right. What else is coming in here? So that more families will have access to the services that we provide. Help shape how people perceive poverty. Get the word out about the need or the issue and how we can collaborate. So I think, and please keep sharing, guys, if you have more thoughts about like why you want to get your organization's story and your work out into the media. Connect people to real life and elevate systemic issues and the responses that are needed. Yes, these are huge. So when we think about it this way, like why we want to do it and about our mission, that's the reason we're here, right? It's not about you and how you look on the camera and that kind of stuff. It's much more about, it's about the mission. It's about getting the information out there. Because I'm the voice of the kids and you can help other parents with the same situation. Yeah, you can make a huge difference. Another one says, connect policy to real life and elevate the systemic issues and the responses that are needed. That is huge. So Thanks, y'all. We can keep coming back to those, but you know, we really want to focus on preparation so that we can put aside the fears and just focus on the mission and why we're here. So we're going to jump back to the Zoom window. If you're still in the Jamboard, you can pop back to the Zoom window so you can see my presentation. I'm going to go to presenter view, and hopefully that works a little better. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Sorry, too many things at once. Okay, so some quick Zoom tips. This is the first one that I want to start with because right now, if you do an interview with the media, you're probably going to be on Zoom, just like everything else that you're doing in life right now. So these Zoom tips are great for interviews. They're also great for being on Zoom all the time. I have Whitney here because she is amazing on camera and always good with the media. And you can see that she has really followed some of the key tips about being on Zoom. One really important thing is you want to have good audio. And that is literally the most important thing. Even if your face is blurry, even if your background is stupid, even if your outfit looks dumb, you know, they need to hear your words. That is key. So you want good audio. And if your computer audio is kind of funky, then use good headphones with a microphone. It doesn't matter if it looks stupid. I'm using it right now because I know y'all can hear me better if I have this thing on. Two is good lighting, and you can see Whitney's got great lighting in that shot. You don't have glaring sun on her. It's not dark and fuzzy, you know, good lighting so that they can see you. Camera position, you know, you see a lot of people on Zoom like this all the time when they're trying to talk to you and you can't even see their face, or their like head is cut off. And, you know, don't be doing that with your camera. If you need to put it up on some books, I have like a little tray table going on to kind of lift it up a little bit so that the camera is like straight on with you. And you'll get a better shot, and it won't be like up your nostrils or whatever while you're trying to get on camera. And your mom will be like, I saw you on the news. What were you doing? You know? And then last thing is just a good background. My background is really boring and plain, which is fine. It's not distracting, and that's really good. You can see Whitney has kind of an interesting background behind her in that picture. And they always used to say, don't have anything in your background. It's too distracting. But actually, look, she looks like a real person in her real house. And I think that's actually very appealing. So, you know, I can see a lot of y'all in your backgrounds. You look really good. I see Jay Vinay's house there looking very, you know, peaceful, just like I would expect. So this is, it's good to have a good background, but that's not the vital thing. What's the most important thing is the audio. So that is my first big tip for you with Zoom interviews. Any questions on Zoom interviews before I jump to the next thing? And y'all feel free to unmute, and also feel free to just type a question into the chat anytime throughout the presentation. I'm covering a lot of stuff and going fast, so stop me at any point. Okay, so here are some interview tips for you for interview readiness. The first thing I want to talk about is having talking points. So you don't want to come into an interview not knowing what you're going to say, because you only get a limited amount of time. And if you haven't prepared your talking points, you will find yourself rambling a little bit and kind of maybe going off topic or forgetting the main thing you meant to say. So you want to write your talking points down ahead of time, always. And I have definitely had this happen where a reporter calls and says, hey, can I get a quote from you right now on this thing? And I'm like, nope, because I haven't thought about it yet. So can I call you back in 5 minutes? And they always say yes. I've never had a reporter say, no, it has to be right this second. So always take a minute to get your talking points together. Even if it's only a minute, you can do it. And the worksheets that I gave you, we're going to get into talking points a little bit more. But the main thing is you really want to think about who is it you're trying to reach with this story. And then you want to speak in clear, simple terms that that person is going to understand. So, you know, if you're doing a story about an event that you want parents to bring their kids to, think about that parent, the words they would use to describe, you know, this thing, and talk to them that way. If you can make it punchy or catchy, definitely do that. You know, use words that will stick in people's minds. I used to do a lot of work on public health and environmental health, and I would have to be talking about scientific words like, well, scientists found a higher level of adipose tissue when subjects were exposed to this toxicant. And as soon as you replace adipose tissue with belly fat, now you're on the news, right? So make sure that you're using words people will understand. Um, so that's the first thing I wanted to say about talking points. You want to always speak in complete thoughts and be quotable. So if they ask you, what time is this event? You don't want to say 8 o'clock. You want to say, this event is being held at 8 o'clock at the state fairgrounds and y'all need to come, right? You want to use a complete sentence, a complete thought every time so they can just pull that quote. They're not going to stitch together a bunch of your words. If they ask you a question that you can't answer, you want to say, I don't know. I think I'm diving into future talking points, but so let me stick to what's on this slide. Speaking complete thoughts, nothing is off the record. Sorry, I was jumping ahead of myself. Nothing is off the record. So what I mean by that is when a reporter is like, what do you think about what Representative so-and-so is doing on this issue? You can't be like, can we go off the record for a second because he's a big fat jerk. Don't do that, right? You want to say everything you say as if it is going on the evening news that night. So, and I can tell y'all, this has happened to me more than once where, a reporter called and said, oh, I just need some information on background. Oh, I just wanted to learn about the issue. And I'm like, is this on background? Am I going to be quoted on this? They're like, no, no, no. And then the next thing you know, the story is running and you hear your voice saying exactly what you said, to that reporter on background. So just be prepared for that everything you say needs to be something you're willing to say on camera or, on the record, even if it's off the record. And then the last thing we're going to cover with interview readiness is practice some pivot points back to your talking points. So you always have your talking points ready. And when they ask you a question that's off the topic, down a rabbit hole, whatever, we're going to pivot back to our talking points. So I'm going to get more into each of these things. But let's practice with pivoting some talking points. I'm closing the chat for a second, so I apologize if y'all send me a chat that I can't answer. So here's some great examples of pivots to your talking points. Reporter asking you a strange or irrelevant question like, well, why are children in this county not going to school when they're serving school lunches, but on other days they do go to, like, some random question, right? And your response is really simple. It's like, wow, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure about that, but here's what I really want to get across to your viewers or your readers. So that's a pivot point, right? That you can use. I have another example. They're asking you a question that you can't answer, like, why did Representative so-and-so vote for that bill? Or why wasn't that budget number higher in your county budget or whatever? I'm not sure about that. I will find out and get back to you. But here's the most important point that I wanted to get across, and then right back to your talking points again. So these are things you can use, again and again in interviews. And here's the most important one. A reporter asks you, you're done with the interview and they ask, do you have anything else to add? Yes, you always have something else to add. Even if you already said it 4 times, you want to get your main point across again. Try again to say it as succinctly as you can. Maybe if you forgot to use your catchy turn of phrase the first time, get it in there the second time. Do you have anything else to add? The answer is always yes. So I think that's a really, really important point that I wanted to get across with you all today. We're going to go to our cheat sheets and interview prep worksheet for a second. But before we do, I want to talk about how you develop your talking points. So when you're developing talking points for an interview, you really can only have one message in an interview. You don't usually get a whole lot of time with a reporter, and they're not going to use more than about 15 seconds of what you say. So you really only have time to get one point across. So that's really when you develop your talking points, you're trying to figure out what is the one thing I'm trying to say. And then you can put together some supporting evidence for that. So you may have and here's a study that backs that up. And when we do this, here's an important way kids will benefit. And I know this because families have told me through this report we did, whatever. But you're just getting one message across. The other thing, and I think I've kind of already said this, but you want to use language that your grandma would understand, right? When you're talking to the media. No adipose tissue, belly fat, right? Or, whatever it is that you need to talk about. Like, here's a typical one from our world is access to healthcare. Children are having trouble accessing healthcare in our county. No, they're not. Kids need to be able to go to the doctor in our county. That's language people will understand. When you talk about access to healthcare, you're further removing people from the issue by using weird language that they would never use, right? So when you talk about kids can't get to the doctor because we don't have transportation in our county, or kids can't get to the doctor because we don't have, this kind of doctor in our county, whatever it is, but you want to use that grandma language that even your grandma will understand. And then the last thing is like, make sure that you're ready to talk about your organization's mission. I have never, ever, ever been interviewed when the reporter did not ask me, okay, what's NC Child? Or what do you guys do? Tell me about your organization. They always ask that. So you want to be ready with your elevator, 5 seconds, get it across clearly. And if your mission statement hasn't been revised in 15 years and it's too long and wordy and all of that, I would be happy to help you come up with like an elevator version that is shorter, that you can run by, your board or your director or whoever you need to talk about with it, to be able to say it shorter, because that can be really hard sometimes, I know. And I have dealt with that myself in the past. What we're going to do right now is I'm going to give you all about 5 minutes to develop some talking points. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then I'm like telling you out loud what I'm doing with my slides, because otherwise I can't do it at the same time as I'm talking. So I am dropping a link into the chat right now for the worksheets that I sent you earlier today. You may already have those open or printed out. And if that's the case, that's great. So you're going to get out that worksheet, and we're going to spend 5 minutes filling out the talking points worksheet. And I want to make sure that I've got it open while I'm talking to you, just in case you guys have questions about what's on it. So these are the questions you're going to answer, and you can write so imagine right now that you've got an interview you need to do for whatever you have coming up. Do you have an event coming up? Do you have a report coming out? Do you have an anniversary for your organization? Are you giving out an award? Whatever it is, think about something your organization has coming up, and please take 5 minutes to work on your talking points for that thing. So let's try to make it real. So your first question is, what's the main point you're trying to get across? I want you to think about who you want to reach with the story, the evidence that supports your point, where can you go for more information, and what does your organization do? So those are the questions on this worksheet that I want you to take some time to think about right now. All right, y'all, we are out of time to fill out the worksheet. Did everybody get at least partway through with that? And do you have any questions about doing your talking points that have come up while you were doing that? All right, hopefully everybody.
I do really quickly. So, okay. So so if we have like those impromptu, really quick, should we just have these kind of on deck, or should we just, because we've gotten calls and it's like, like you said, can you tell us about such and such, or how you're running remote learning during COVID? Yes. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. So
hold up. Yeah, let me think.
You're right. And then I looked silly. So how do we just make sure that we, just have these on point or on deck, or is that what you're saying that we go ahead and do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ebony. And that's part of the reason I wanted to give you all this stuff like as worksheets that you could keep and, download your own copy, because I think this worksheet is something you can keep on hand all the time. And if you need to just scribble it out on the back of an envelope, that works too. And over time, as you do if you do this a lot, then it kind of gets ingrained, I often don't need to, get out a document like that anymore, but I still know I need to think and write down, what do I want to say? What's my supporting evidence? Who's my audience? What do I need to tell this reporter? I'm always going to do that before I talk to them, even if I don't use the worksheet. But yeah, you can definitely keep this and use it in the future. Jeannie, I see your comment in the chat. I'm really sorry I didn't see that before. You can't type into that Google worksheet. You have to save your own copy. And you can also print it out and use it that way. But I definitely encourage you to download a copy and save it for that kind of thing. Okay, y'all, I'm going to give you an assignment to work with this for a minute. So we are going to pair up with partners and we're going to interview each other. So I'm going to give you a practice interview and we're going to have to do it kind of quickly. So we're just going to take about 10 minutes to do this. I'm putting the Jamboard link back in the chat because the Jamboard has questions for the reporters on the next page. So first, one of you, when we go to the breakout rooms, one of you will be a reporter. The other one, use your talking points that you just wrote to be interviewed. And then I'll let you know when we're halfway through time and you can switch roles and interview the other person. It's just a chance to practice working with talking points. So low pressure, but just an opportunity to get a little practice. So if you look on the Jamboard on page 3, you will see interview questions for the reporters. And if you have any problems with that, let me know in the chat. And I am going to go ahead and send you all into some breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everybody. So I would love to hear how that
Sorry,
went.
I don't hear anything.
Uh-oh. Let's see.
See, I see.
Is it working now?
When they come back from the breakout rooms, you have to pick your channel again. At least
okay.
I did.
Okay, so for Spanish, please choose your language again. I'm sorry that you have to do that, but at the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you want Spanish, please go ahead and pick your Spanish channel. So for everybody else, would love to hear how that went. What did your partner do really well when you were interviewing them? Does anybody have feedback about something that their partner did really, really well? You can just unmute if you want, or you can put it into the chat.
Well, I can go to get the ball rolling. LaMonica did a great job of describing what her organization does and how it ties to actual benefits for children in the community. And it made a good soundbite that I think that they could have used.
That's really great. It's always so important to be prepared with that, to talk about your organization. Anybody else want to give their partner some positive feedback? What'd your partner do really well?
Vinay did a wonderful job just being clear. She wanted to promote, film screening events. And when I asked her, well, how's COVID relate to this? Or what about kids not being in school? She just kind of went with the flow and took it back to her main message. So I thought she did a great job.
That's great. That's great. Cool. For anybody who, when you were interviewed, what do you think you could have done better? Is there something you were like, oh, I forgot to do that. Oh, I wish I had done that. Everybody was perfect. Oh my God, I'm so glad to hear that. Congratulations, everybody. I love it. Oh, that's great. So Ebony handled a curveball really well. That is great to hear. And you're always going to get those. So that's really important. All right, well, we don't have a lot of time left. So I just want to cover a couple more things while we still have some time. The next thing I want to talk about is building relationships with reporters. This is really important because if a reporter knows that you're a good source and you're going to give a good quote and have clear information, they're going to call you again and again. So Ebony, I was really happy to hear you say, like, they ask me that all the time. That means you're a good source and that's why they're calling you. So good job. So these are just a few tips for how to build your relationship with reporters. The first one, read the news, follow the stories that they write. And if you see a reporter write a story that you really like, or that lifts up your issue in a good way, give them a shout out, get on the Twitter, they're all on the Twitter, and let them know that they did a good job with the story. Or if they didn't do such a good job with the story, you still thank them, for doing it in the first place, for covering your issue. And then you can offer, a clarification or a suggestion or, always in a positive frame. letter to the editor, whatever you want to do, but definitely read their stories and let them know you're reading. So that is the number one thing. The second thing, reporters are easiest to get up with by phone or even by text. So you want to have their number, and that's how you get in touch with them. They are on deadline writing every single day. They have to turn in a story almost every day by about 3 o'clock. So they don't have time to sit around on the email and see what's coming in. They're not like waiting for you to email. So calling them is a great way to break through the noise. They get a lot of press releases every day by email. And if you have a relationship with a reporter, you can ask them, do you prefer if I text you? Many of them do. So I usually ask first, but text is a great way to stay in touch with the special reporters in your life. And then Twitter, I will say almost every reporter I can think of is on Twitter. That's how they're sharing their stories, looking at other stories, talking about the issues. Get in there and engage with them. You know, if they're talking about something that matters to you, weigh in. And you can, if you have the authority to do that from your organization's Twitter account, great. If you just want to do that personally, that's fine too. And you will see they will sometimes send you just direct messages via Twitter to ask you questions or get your email address or see if they can call. So Twitter can be a really good way to stay in touch with them. And these are really in order of importance. So the last one I have on here is email. Like I said, they're like you, they're flooded with emails. So these other ways are better for breaking through. But email can be important if you need to send them a report or a press release or something like that. So that's what I wanted to share about reporters. Does anybody have questions about this before I jump to the next piece? And I think this can be hard because there are fewer reporters covering our issues than there used to be, you have probably noticed. And it can be tough to keep up with who is at which, you know, newspaper or which TV station because they do move around a lot. Oops. Okay. So in the link that I sent you earlier today, in the worksheets, I also have some templates for press releases, several different types of press releases, and I'll drop the link into the chat also. Feel free to use these templates for anything that you're sending out. Some of the main things I want to share about press releases are make sure that you always have good contact information in your press release, a phone number and an email, and make sure that the person will answer the phone when the reporter calls. So if you're having an event and you send out your press release, you know, the Wednesday before the event, and, you know, Greg, if your name is on there, you need to be ready to pick up the phone on that Wednesday or Thursday, you know, after you send the press release out. So don't put somebody's phone number on there who's about to go on vacation. I have done that. That's not a good idea. Or email address, but make sure your contact information is good and the person is ready to talk to the press. A press release can be a really important tool. It's a great way to make sure they get the words that you need them to get on a piece of paper. However, your personal pitch to that reporter is way more important in terms of whether they're actually going to write a story. So I really find that I can send, you know, Rose Hoban, who's the editor at North Carolina Health News. She covers the issues that we work on quite a lot. She's very busy, and I can send her the same press release like 12 times and not get a response. But if I send her a quick tweet or text her and ask her like, hey, do you have time to write about that report? That gets her attention, and we'll have a conversation about it because it's much more personal rather than just like blasting out an email that everybody else will get. If you live in a smaller rural area and you have like a local paper, many times that press release is a great tool because they'll just print it word for word when you email it to them. So my tips about press releases don't apply quite as much to like the Kinston Free Press or the, you know, the Morganton, I can't remember the Morganton paper, but when you send them a press release, they're more likely to just print exactly what you send them. La Conexión will do the same thing. If I send them a press release in Spanish, they just print it, which is really great. But the bigger outlets, you're going to need to have a much more personal conversation. And that's the really important thing. So in the link that I sent you, I'm sorry, I said I was going to put it into the chat and I'll put it in there now. But in the link that I sent you, you will find the templates for those press releases. There's several different types, like one for an event, one for, if you're getting an award, one for a report that you have coming out. And you can use those to your heart's content. So the link is in the chat. And it's also in the email that I sent you earlier today, so that you can save those. Just download a copy. You won't be able to edit what I sent you. You have to download your own copy. But I really encourage you to do that and use those in the future. So I know that we crammed in a lot in the time that we had today. I wanted to make sure there was time for questions. So what questions do you all have, or is there anything you want me to go back to from what we already covered?
So I do have another question.
Yes, please.
So if I had a call and they didn't want to share, they just kind of wanted to ask some questions, but weren't really clear about what they wanted to talk about. It was related to COVID in our programs, but I was, specific, like, okay, what kind of questions are you looking for? And it just felt like, I don't know if they were trying to trap us or something, but it just kind of felt like if he wouldn't be very clear, so that I could kind of pre-plan. So how would I handle that in the future if something like that happened again?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say that's pretty unusual. Normally when a reporter wants to talk, they are really trying to write a good story. And so they want to make it as easy as possible for you to give them that information so that they can write a good story. So they're usually really nice. A lot of times, if you ask them for the questions ahead of time, they will go ahead and send them so that you have time to think. Most reporters aren't going to try to have a gotcha or something like that. So in that case, if a reporter is acting weird like that, then you might want to stop for a minute and say I'm really slammed right now. Can I schedule something with you for later today or tomorrow? I just need a little bit more information about what this story is about. You can kick it up the chain to your boss. You can kick it up if you have someone else you work with on communications. If you want to bring your director into the conversation, or whoever else you might want to kind of kick it around with. And if they're calling from somewhere that you've never heard of, they're maybe not really sure they're actually a reporter, you can check on that stuff. So take some time, and it's okay to say, like, I am really slammed right now. Let me get back with you later, so that you have time to, check on it a little bit more. I have had one sort of gotcha experience with a reporter in 25 years or so of working with the media. And it wasn't a gotcha on me. It was a politician that they were trying to do that to. But the reporter was from the News and Observer, and he didn't tell me ahead of time, like, by the way, I'm going to ask you about Speaker Jim Black, who might be going to jail, before we had the conversation. But he sprung that on me in the middle of the conversation, and I was not prepared at all. And my quote on the front page the next day of the News and Observer is not something I clipped and saved and sent to my mother. But it's not the end of the world, because Jim Black did go to jail and it had nothing to do with me. So, everything's fine. And sometimes weird things like that happen. You just do your best. But I think that is very, very unusual. Any other questions, y'all? I know it's like, probably haven't even had lunch yet and it's almost 1 o'clock.
Hey, Fawn, this is Greg, and we get a lot of requests from local media sometimes that want to connect with the families that we work with.
Yeah.
And we kind of mixed. We've been kind of mixed on how we handle that and work with that. And I'm just curious if you have suggestions on that.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and probably something that many of you have to deal with. So I think the first thing is to figure out, stop now, since that's a request you frequently get, right? Stop now and think about, like, what's our policy on that? Like, how do we want to handle that? Because there's nothing more powerful than a personal story. It is a great way to get the message out. And you need to protect people's privacy. You need to respect, people's privacy. You need to be respectful of what parts of people's stories they may want to share and may not want to share, what parts of their identities or their family structure they may or may not want to share. You want to make sure that they're adequately prepared for an interview and know what kinds of questions might be asked. You may need to protect their identity completely, depending on their legal status, depending on their immigration status, depending on, you know, whether they're involved in a court case. You know, lots of those things can be can come into play, and you don't want to compromise the most important issues in people's lives. And you want to get great stories out there. So I think that you can sort of write down, like, what are the things that we need to know before we would connect a reporter to a family. Go through that list. And then when a reporter asks you that question, you can say, you know, will you do X, Y, or Z? You know, I've had to ask reporters, can you compensate families for their time because they don't have time to talk to you? Can you protect their identity? Can you do this anonymously? And sometimes they have to say no, and that's fine. Just always ask all the questions and get all the information up front. But then as far as like connecting people's stories to the press, what the approach that we have come to at NC Child is that, you know, Lamine, Adam, those are the two main folks on our staff who do work that we call story collection, where we actually interview people ourselves about what they have going on, whether that's related to their health care, whether that's related to nutrition, you know, hunger, whatever it is. And one of the questions we ask is, are you willing to talk to a reporter? Yes or no? Under what circumstances? Can we use your name or not? You know, and we record all of that in a spreadsheet and keep track of that. So if Lynn Bonner calls and is like, I need to talk to somebody who can't pay their health bills right now, I can look at that spreadsheet and say, oh, we have somebody who might be willing to talk to you about that. Lamine has a relationship with that person. She'll call them, see if they want to do it, make sure they're prepared, and then connect them. So it takes a lot of footwork to make that happen, but it's critical for protecting people's privacy and responsibly getting those stories out to the press. And I'm happy to work with any of you all on sort of putting that into practice yourselves. All right, folks, I know it's after 1 and I know you want to wrap up. Any quick questions I can answer before we wrap? All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. And before we go, I'm going to drop my phone number and my email, which you probably already have, into the chat box so that you can call me anytime for help with your media work. Feel free to send me a press release to read anytime. Hopefully the templates are helpful. But yeah, if you have follow-up questions or need any additional information, I am always here for you and would love to hear from you about it. So thank you very, very much for being here today.